Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from. My name is Jacob Magero. I'm a marketing executive at Africa Health Business. Welcome to today's high-level discussion on partnerships towards accelerating access for the COVID-19 vaccine. We are delighted to see all the stakeholders who have joined us from the private sector, development partners, and government agencies. I would now like to highlight that today's session is in English and will run for a duration of 90 minutes. I take this opportunity to introduce AHB. We are a consultancy, advisory, and investment firm. We have worked with many of you here today in a variety of ways. And as you can see on the right, these are some of the services we offer. Today, we are here as a stakeholder convener to facilitate an important discussion for the future of the African continent. Here, we have the agenda for the session, highlighting some of the key contributors to the discussion. And at this juncture, I wish to welcome today's facilitator, Dr. Amit Thacker, who is the Executive Chairman at Africa Health Business. Welcome, Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, Jacob, and ladies and gentlemen. You know, as I was saying earlier, we seem to be working round the clock, working round the week, and working on weekends. Thank you for spending your Saturday. But this is an important conversation. As I said earlier, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I think for the next 6 months, vaccine roadmap for Africa and maybe also for the world will take center stage. And many of you are involved in many aspects. We started getting involved in testing, tracking, and treating, but now the vaccine discussion is going to take a major stage. Each one of us would like to receive a vaccination that is safe and effective so that we can get back to the economic model and make a difference in the kind of work that we've all been doing. On the next slide, I'll show you a little bit of what the government funds in vaccines are per infant. Many of you may have seen this, but when we were working with our team on this session, it occurred to us that GDP and wealth is going to make all the difference in vaccines. Have a look. You can see the amount of spend being done by many countries on infant vaccines. Africa probably stands at 10% or less in many comparative figures when it comes to vaccine spend. No doubt that when we have discussions with the Ministry of Health, we really look out for Gavi and others for essential vaccines that have been put into our health system. I wonder if vaccines were not free or supported by donors, what would be the penetration of vaccines to the children of some of these low middle income countries? It's a reality, it's a fact. When it comes to COVID, I think economics will start having an interplay. Though we are looking at equitable distribution today, the stakeholders here are really going to talk about who has the biggest check. Will the checkbook make the difference for saving lives? If it has done in the past, what will change when it comes to COVID? So the weight of the checkbook might really matter on who gets the safe vaccination. South Africa, Algeria are documented on this slide, and you can see the other countries. We definitely need to ensure that we have appropriate financing. Look at the next slide. It'll tell you the challenges. So when I come to the panel, there are lots of models around COVID vaccine that have been discussed, but cross-cutting challenges are these 5. We have an already overstretched immunization system, and I want to really circle this discussion around Africa. The second challenge is under-resourced logistics, inventory tracking systems. The cold chain requirements can be a nightmare. Imagine you have all these vaccines, but the transport isn't appropriate, and then it remains ineffective. And then we have challenges in tracking the multi-dose vaccinations. I don't know whether this COVID will be multi-dose, and if it is, it adds a layer of another challenge. and then of course, vaccine acceptance. So, you know, I really wanted to ask Harold and Lisa, who are already here, to, to speak to some of these challenges. One thing was about cold chain requirements. I wanted to ask Ernest and Ismail to try and talk about challenges on tracking multi-dose vaccines. I thought Dr. Gitahi and Dr. Ademola could talk about vaccine acceptance, but feel free to choose your interventions when we come to the panel. On the next slide, after you've all seen the cost of vaccines, it's all about COVAX. No doubt, I must applaud everything that's going around COVAX. It's incredible how this collaboration has worked. And in the next 3 or 4 sessions that we've outlined for vaccines, we will have Gavi and CEPI leading on our conversations. COVAX, he wants to ensure global equitable access to COVID vaccines. And we know that the ACT accelerator has vaccine pillar. COVAX is the vaccine pillar of the ACT accelerator. Now look at these WHO and CEPI aims. Doses for at least 20% of the countries, diverse and active managed portfolio vaccines, delivered as soon as they're available, and the acute phase of the pandemic, and rebuild economies. These are pillars around the COVAX. But we also have pillars that have been modeled and designed for Africa. And those pillars are being led and crafted by Africa CDC. When we first heard the case in February, and even before that, I remember being in Addis Ababa with John Kengasong, models of trying to test early, advising the governments on restriction of movement, and enabling some kind of training so that the labs that were only 2 in Africa moved from 2 to virtually every country in Africa. So now the PCR tests are being done everywhere. But the continental strategy received great push and support from private sector, also from philanthropic organizations and foundations, but also from the heads of state and government. So I think we've got to give a pat on the back to Africa CDC for the sterling job that they've done. We are with you, we are supporting you, and we as the private sector and non-state actors on this call will fully engage with the work that you continue to do. I would now like to segue to Africa CDC and invite Dr. Nikais Dembi, who is the Senior Science Advisor to Africa CDC, to share with us a roadmap as his keynote address today. Dr. Dembi, over to you. Please share with us where we stand today.
Thanks so much for the nice introduction, Dr. Amit. Could you please allow me to share my slide? I have a couple of slides for this presentation.
Sure, of course. So
Great.
if we can unshare our slides, Jeremy, and ask Dr. Dembi to share. There you are.
Yes, thank you. Let me just take you back there. Yeah, so thanks so much again for this, for inviting Africa CDC to really share with you the Africa CDC vaccine strategy. So you clearly pointed out, really, we had a continental COVID-19 vaccine strategy. Basically, it's around 3 key pillars. Around preventing transmission, with aim of preventing transmission, preventing death, preventing social and economic harms. And then for the topic today, really, I would like just to focus on pillar 1, which actually the COVID-19 vaccine strategy lies on. Yeah, you actually rightly pointed out as well that a COVID-19 vaccine will allow member states really to timely return to regional economic development agenda. And this is definitely going to protect the most vulnerable populations. We're going to talk about a little bit what is our vision when we actually develop this COVID-19 vaccine strategy. So if you look at, again, the population, about 1.2 to 1.3 billion inhabitant in Africa. So if you look at traditional vaccines, I'm seeing that again, clearly stated, traditional vaccine require at least 2 doses. So we're talking, if you really want to fully vaccinate the entire population, African population, you need about 3 billion doses. So all those, we try to do some kind of modeling around that, looking at, again, if you look at the 20%, really set by the COVAX facility, in our strategy, the Africa COVID-19 vaccine strategy, we're aiming at vaccinating about 60%. So what is actually, I think this, you might say this is really ambitious, but we look at other programs like the measles vaccination. Really, you would like to, if you want to meet, at least reach a 60% herd immunity, you're going to aim really to vaccinate about 70 to 95%. So with 20%, we do agree. It's really an unprecedented effort where we all need the vaccine, but also we're looking at the sustainability and durability. So with all around wastages and all those, I think we aim to look at 1.5 billion doses for the entire continent. How do we aim to do that? So it's clear if we don't have a very robust strategy here based on the current data from the World Bank, and then you can see that really the cost really in terms of lost by the continent is around 37 to 80 billions. Really, you can see that just for 2020, and we can actually be back to at least a recession after 25 years. So the investment is really quite needed a year. So what do we need really for a successful immunization if we have a safe and efficacious COVID-19 vaccine? So these are the 3 pillars now for the vaccine, the Africa vaccine strategy. The first one, we felt really to accelerate African involvement into clinical trials. I'm going to explain a little bit more here. So what we've done so far. Then the second one is around access to sufficient vaccine supply, which will actually under that second pillar, you have access, financing, and procurement. And then the manufacturing capacity that we also look at beyond COVID-19. If we have a pathogen X in the next coming years, how are we prepared? What have we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic? I think that those should be really things we would like to leverage and learn from. So, and the last pillar on the vaccine strategy is around regulatory. If a COVID-19 vaccine, safe and efficacious, is available, have we removed all, are we prepared to unlock the processes so that we can actually have, that will enable access to member states to the vaccines? I think those are the key things that we're also working towards and using all the instruments, Africa CDs and African Union, to be able to meet that. And then around delivery, we did mention, we're all aware of data so far released in terms of efficacy. You can see that some of these will require cold chain. It's not new, but when it's beyond -20, because we have -70, -20 now, and all those, we really want to think carefully in terms of readiness and preparedness at country level. And lastly, Uptake. I'm happy that Dr. Giktindi is also on this call. I'm going to share also that what we have so far been able to achieve as a continent. So, on the clinical trial development, so you probably might be aware, in June, we have a continental consultation. And we had about 3,000 delegates across the continent that attended that virtual conference. It was around really the African leadership in terms of access and in terms of also equity that we did mention. So following that, we launched really what we call now CONCVACT, is a consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials. And what we did really was to engage vaccine manufacturers, both on the COVAX and non-COVAX facility, We've engaged over 50 vaccine manufacturers. Those were willing to do or undertake clinical trials on the continent. And the aim was actually to at least have 3 well-chosen COVID-19 vaccine candidates that could actually will definitely going to be having them or facilitate or really engage some of the sites that we've mapped to be undertake clinical trials on the continent. So we started with a mapping. All sites that have first they have experience in undertaking clinical trial, either malaria, TB, Lassa, Ebola. We had about 300 potential clinical trial sites. Now we narrow it down looking at 5 dimensions. We look to be covering experience, the epidemiology, the capacity at the site to do some virological and immunological assays for actually safety and efficacy. And then also the capacity to really have an independent review board. So we looked at that, and then we ended up with about 20 to 50, 20 kind of tier-ready sites ready to go, and about additional 30 that we need to provide some kind of capacity building in that tiering that we actually established based on the 5 dimensions that I did mention. Working with partners to be able to achieve that. EDCTP, the Africa Academy of Science, going through the Pan-African Registry and the clinicaltrial.gov. So kind of quite extensive exercise in the mapping. So again, in that process, we also were trying to look at around regulatory decisions when it comes into the rollout of vaccine, and then also fostering African manufacturing capacity. So the second pillar, I think that's where probably you all ask, how do we plan to achieve the 60% beyond the 20% set by COVAX? This is the strategy, the African Union strategy. The first one, we fully commit to the financial and political support of the COVAX facility. Actually, we encourage all member states to sign up, those eligible to sign up. That's the one. So as to secure, well, we know that's going to come with a cost, at least the 20%. So now the second and open opportunity is for member states really to pursue non-competing direct deals with manufacturers, which is fine. We're open to that. And then, but lastly, we develop as African Union, Africa CDC financing instrument through the Afreximbank promissory note, kind of vaccine bond. So what do we do there? We have so far mobilized about $5 billion US. And to be able to cover the extra 40% I did mention, if we want to meet the 60% vaccinations for the continent. So for the 40%, we need about 12 billion, and we've mobilized so far $5 billion US to be able to do that. And this is a very really promising financing instrument, and this has been endorsed by the head of state and government. And then we have a specific tax team working in with really the best mind on the continent on how best to mobilize the remaining 7 billion through member state contributions. So on the second, underneath the access and then the supply and procurement, again, really key here is the vaccine manufacturing capacity. You want to talk about equity, you want to talk about access, you want to talk about allocation. Really, we would like to see with the limited capacity now on the continent, how do we move from here? In the short and long term, probably. So we've really encouraged some of the vaccine manufacturers in really setting up some of these plans on the continent. I really would like to encourage that. We see Aspen already in South Africa, and then the government of Egypt and Morocco also encouraging manufacturing on the continent. This is going to go a long way in boosting actually the productions, also access for countries. So on the regulatory, we're working with AMRH, the EU, NEPAT, WHO to fast track the post and market authorizations for both global authorization and continental authorization. Very key here is to be sure that once we have a vaccine, that there are no delays in terms of access because of the regulatory bottlenecks. So this is very important. So we are actively working on this, And what we're doing currently is to map all the challenges, all the potential barriers. And then what we're going to do is provide solutions to be able to unlock some of these barriers. And I think in the next couple of months, so we can get all these really sorted out in terms of fast tracking of approvals, indemnifications, as we mentioned, and also issues around pharmacovigilance, which are actually a component of the post-market authorizations. All these have been actually looked into. So the delivery is a key challenge. Now, if you're aware, there are several tools that have already been deployed, and member states have completed some of these exercises. We've already filled in some of these questionnaires, and what we're doing now is to really be able to look at the level of readiness and how the supply chain, how are we prepared, what level of financing for already an overstretched really immunization system. As mentioned earlier, how do we really prepare to roll out and deploy some of these vaccines? I think it's very important, and it's really a key. Those are key questions. I think we still have a lot to hear from the vaccine manufacturers in terms of storage conditions, the logistics. But so far, I think we're really thinking through how best we can mobilize resources to support our member state. And on Uptake, good year also with, I'm pleased to inform you that Africa CDC, we have really been conducting a continental-wide survey on vaccine perceptions and acceptance. So far, that's in 15 member states. We have data, still preliminary data in about 10 member states already that we're analyzing and looking at closely. But the overall message here, to just land on the hesitancy, the question is straightforward question. If a COVID-19 vaccine is safe and efficacious available, will you take it? So from the 10 member states that have completed the exercise, we have overall like 60 to 80% level of acceptance, which is quite good for us as a continent. And we're going to work towards that to really increase that number in the coming days so that we are sure we're protecting the most vulnerable population. I think lastly, just on the CONCVACT, just to say we have a governance structure. And again, for the same will apply for the Pillar 2 on access, procurement. Also, we have a governance structure, the best of the mind on the continent to really discuss this and get solutions really to address issues around financing, issues around clinical trials, and lastly, issues around delivery, uptake, and as well as regulatory. So thank you so much for this time, for time already allocated to Africa CDC and African Union to share this vaccine strategy with the team. Over. Thank you so much, Amit.
Thank you, Dembi. I think you spelled out the 3-pillar strategy for Africa clearly. I think the panelists, we'll have 8 panelists after the 2 or 3 speakers that are following you, and they will touch a little bit on these challenges that you mentioned about regulatory delivery uptake, access to supply, and also the clinical trials. I really am really grateful for the time you've spent with us this Saturday to spell out this. Dr. Dembi, as you know, this is ongoing conversation. We'll be counting on you as we track the progress forward. And I would now like to invite Mr. Kennedy Njau, if we can now swap the slides and let us move on to our presentation from AstraZeneca. Kennedy, over to you. Share with us where you think and what we need to learn from the work done. Welcome, Kennedy Njau. You need to stop sharing the slide from our side, gentlemen, so that Kennedy can put up his slide. And Kennedy, you may want to begin now. You can unmute and proceed with your presentation. We'll give 5 minutes to each of the 3 speakers, and then we'll go to the panel and we'll probably have a Q&A. So Kennedy, are you ready? Yes, we can see your slide. You may want to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Now it's very clear. Go ahead, Kennedy.
All right, thank you very much. So thanks everyone, and thank you, Dr. Amit, for having me on this very great panel. Really honored to be here to represent AstraZeneca, as well as to discuss with the distinguished panelists. As you may know, AstraZeneca has a global development and supply agreement with the University of Oxford on the recombinant adenovirus vaccine candidate AZD1222, formerly referred to as ChAdOx COV-19. And this collaboration with the University of Oxford is aimed at accelerating the development and the production of AZD1222, which is the University of Oxford's recombinant adenovirus vaccine, and to ensure broad and equitable supply of the vaccine throughout the world at no profit during the pandemic. The vaccine candidate uses a non-recombinant, a non-human recombinant viral vector, which contains the genetic material of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein. And this vector offers the advantage of provoking a strong immune response. And as it's not replicating, it cannot cause an ongoing infection in a vaccinated individual. My next slide, just one second, sorry. Apologies, trying to get to my next slide. Yeah, so the approach, sorry about that. The approach is to ensure broad and equitable access by collaborating with governments and of course with the University of Oxford on the clinical development program. And I'll give you a snapshot of where the clinical development program is taking place, which includes 2 African countries, and very importantly as well to collaborate with multilateral organizations, which I'll also list for you in the next slide, as well as supply partners to ensure increased production and distribution around the world. So agreements are in place to supply capacity towards 3 billion doses at no profit during the pandemic. So procurement teams, as well as partnership teams, have been very hard at work to secure these agreements around the world. And as you can see, this is with agreements across different continents and with different governments, as well as different multilateral stakeholders. And the governments included here, I'd mention a few would be the UK, the EU, the US, and other governments as well. And in terms of multilateral collaborations, and it's very specific and relevant for Africa, we have a collaboration with the COVAX Facility, which is, as earlier mentioned, co-led by Gavi, CEPI, and the WHO, and it's a vaccine spiller of the COVID-19 tools accelerator, the ACT. And AstraZeneca's agreement with CEPI is to deliver 300 million doses of the vaccine, which is currently a vaccine candidate, of course, subject to the trial or subject to having shown or proven safety and efficacy in the ongoing phase 3 studies, as well as having the vaccine being approved by the relevant regulatory authorities. So the CEPI, Gavi, COVAX facility will be very relevant for African continent in terms of supply to our governments. And a lot of our governments are already in touch and speaking to Gavi and CEPI through the COVAX facility. And we do hope that that will be at least one route through which our African population can access the vaccine. But we are very cognizant of the fact that that supply may not be adequate. Of course, it will need to be augmented. So we have had a separate agreement, which is a sub-licensing agreement with the SII, which you see right on top, on the top of the slide there, which is the Serum Institute of India. And the agreement with the Serum Institute of India is to potentially augment the supply into Africa of the AZD1222 vaccine candidate, which hopefully will be officially a vaccine if the trials prove successful, safe and effective, and the regulators approve. The agreement is to have a supply from SII of 1 billion doses for low and middle income countries, which Africa is part of. So what we're doing, because this is a sub-licensing agreement, the Serum Institute of India will have the rights to supply governments in our region that approach them. And what we're doing is to help that or to support that engagement between our governments and the Serum Institute of India. So a couple of governments have approached us already, and we've put them in touch with the Serum Institute of India. And as you well know, the Serum Institute of India is one of the largest vaccine manufacturers in the world in terms of numbers of doses produced, and they supply vaccines to over 170 countries around the world. So we believe that our collaboration with the SII is ideal and relevant for our region. As you can see there, importantly, we also have agreements in Brazil, in China, as well as and various countries around the world. And we are indeed committed to equitable supply, not just in one or two continents, but really across the world. In terms of the clinical development plan, I did mention to you that I would mention where the clinical development program is ongoing. So currently the phase 3 trial, the phase 2 study is ongoing in the US and in the UK and Brazil. But as you can see, Africa is represented in the phase 1/2 study, which is, as you know, and this is quite unique to the vaccines world, that the phase 1, phase 2 has been ongoing in parallel with phase 3 studies. So Africa is represented by Kenya and South Africa in the earlier phase of the development program, that is phase 1 and phase 2. And of course, this is ongoing and it's evolving. As you can see, we have countries where the study has, or the trial has started, and also in development, being planned as well in a few other countries. So this is the map of the ongoing study. As you can see, very good representation around the world. And I have to emphasize, it's led by Oxford University. And as I said, AstraZeneca has an agreement, an exclusive agreement with Oxford University in terms of the manufacture and supply around the world. So, and this is my last slide to just let you know that in fact, this is an unparalleled response to secure and establish supply globally. We definitely recognize the fact that this cannot be done by ourselves alone, and it's really not a competition. It's about what we can do as a community and as manufacturers, in collaboration with stakeholders, in collaboration with governments, to ensure equitable supply around the world. And of course, we will add to what other manufacturers will bring in order to supplement and to work together. We have identified the networks. There's a strategy around the networks, and there's commitment around technology transfers as well to drive optimization and access around the world. So thank you very much, and that's it from me.
Thank you, Kennedy. We've learned a lot. We also want to congratulate your organization for spreading it out wide. Having some countries in Africa participate is also very, very valuable. We are in the mix. Equitable is the right word you used. And you also have full support from collaborating partners here. Let me now invite one of the partners who's also in the forefront of making sure we have equitable distribution and everyone gets the doses of vaccine is G42. Walid Zahir has dialed in from UAE. And Walid, please tell us on the clinical research and innovation that G42 is deeply involved in and what we can expect in the future. Please welcome Walid.
Thank you very much. Proud to be here. As we all know, Group 42 is based in United Arab Emirates. Group 42 Healthcare is a subsidiary of Group 42. The corporate.
Sorry for that interference, but I think you're okay now, Walid. You can carry on. Walid, you are on mute. If you can unmute, then you can be back with us on the scene. Could you unmute? Yes, we lost you for a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So as I was saying, our Group 42 Healthcare is a part of the subsidiary of Group 42, the main corporate. We are a company that is based in United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi. Our portfolio spans in healthcare technologies and solutions and pharmaceuticals. Group 42 Healthcare have launched a For Humanity campaign through a collaboration with Sinopharm. Sinopharm is one of the largest pharmaceutical and vaccine manufacturers in China. That campaign was launched on July 16th in the UAE, and it was aimed as launching the phase 3 clinical trial of the inactivated COVID-19 vaccine developed by Sinopharm. In that regard, they have developed 2 vaccines, the Wuhan vaccine and the Beijing vaccine. Both of them were included in the trial. The trial was at recruiting 45,000 volunteers, which we have successfully achieved. It quickly gained momentum. We were able to recruit that number in the past 3 months since the launch. Building on our success in United Arab Emirates, this clinical trial have had centers outside of UAE in Middle Eastern and African countries that included Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, and a parallel clinical trials were conducted also in Morocco, Brazil, Peru, Indonesia. The aim was to test the efficacy and to continue on the safety that was proven already in phase 1 and 2 clinical trials that were conducted in China. At this moment, we have successfully succeeded in recruiting people from multiple ethnicities. We have more than 125 registered nationalities during the trial, which actually we didn't face the problem of having a ethnicity problem in our trial. Many of our volunteers have completed their second dose. All of them completed their first dose. So this vaccine, both of them are based on a 2-dose regimen. As I said, this is an inactivated vaccine. We didn't face a lot of problems regarding the logistics because we didn't need a cold chain to transport the vaccines during the clinical trial. This being inactivated, it's a regular vaccine that you can keep in the refrigerator 2 to 8 Celsius. So far, from whatever we are seeing, the safety profile is excellent. We haven't had any serious side effects so far in the 45,000 volunteers that we have recruited. We are so close into announcing the results. I would have hoped that by today we already have announced it, but in the next few days, I would say, the results will be announced, and it's very promising. We are really happy about our progress, and we are really happy about how this clinical trial have been conducted. We are really proud of the momentum that we have gained, and this clinical trial being developed in almost all the continents, and this plethora of recruitment that have happened from all over the globe have assured us that whatever we are going to announce is will be a continuation of whatever we announced at the beginning, which is we are doing this trial. We have partnered with Sinopharm with the aim of introducing a vaccine for humanity purposes. We are aiming into continue collaboration with the manufacturer to be to ensure that this vaccine is deliverable to most countries around the world. Being a co-sponsor and based in UAE, which is one of the biggest countries in the world when it comes to humanitarian rights, we already have plans in motion to ensure that this vaccine is delivered not only to highly developed countries, but to every country around the globe. We're already in talks with countries countries in Africa and in Asia into how can we move from the clinical trial, announcing the results, and ensure that when we reach the production stage, we are ready to supply the vaccine, if it's successful, hopefully it is, to every country around the globe.
Thank you, Walid. Thank you, Walid, for that fantastic 45,000 volunteers, the momentum, about Zenufa, about humanitarian, about a few days. We're going to call you again when we do the second round, and I hope you can announce something by then. I know 3rd December will be our second conversation of what you call deepening the vaccine talk. So we wish you all the best. You have all our support, but the more players are in the market, the more quality we get, and the more partnerships we get, the more people will get the vaccine. I know we will be calling on you, so thank you very much. Let me now move on to Mr. Samba Batili, one of the partners we have in the private sector, who also is in the forefront. I know, Samba, you are catching a flight, but you're also deeply involved in making sure this conversation continues. And we are grateful for your support. And on the 3rd, we'll have a second call. So please welcome Mr. Samba Batili just to give us a snap brief and his commitment to what we are doing in Africa. Samba, if you can hear us, this is the time to give us your snap comment. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, doctor.
Hi, Samba, how are you?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very loud and clear. Thank you for coming online.
Okay. So, just for you to know, I'm between 2 flights.
I know. And we have got a conversation going, Samba, on the vaccines. We just heard from G42 and Africa CDC. What we want you to give us is your hope. What is your hope and what is your desire for vaccines in Africa for the COVID-19 pandemic? Over to you.
My desire is to put an ecosystem from the manufacturer to the operation, and structure of financing from A to Z. So to make it easier for African. And also one thing I understand that there will be a lot of logistic and packaging. And I think Africans should come together, to be strong on the balance, because from what I understand, especially by discussing with G42, that there will be a lot of issue on the packaging, and the current industrial capacity is not going to handle everybody. And if China is 1 billion people, Europe and America, if we don't move fast, African will be left behind. So I think this is the time to come together with CDC and all the African government to structure a way that can be, we will have easy finance and also logistic and manufacturing. So this is, I think, what we should strike together quickly, and then to be ready when everybody is jumping around, all around.
Thank you. Thank you, Samba. Thank you also for your organization. I see you are committing resources, you're committing time, you're committing your company's efforts towards making sure Africa CDC, governments and private sector work together. We'll be counting on you, but I can see the vision that you don't want Africa to be left behind. We are with you, and thank you. And we do wish you a safe flight in between. Stay with us as long as you can, because we have some very interesting panel following this conversation, which I'd like to jump on now straight away. So let me also welcome our panelists who are here. We have 8 fantastic interventions, and all these guys represent different ways of making sure Africa is not left behind. You can see the 5 challenges we are going to have when it comes to vaccine listed on the front of this slide. And you have these team members who are going to give us between 1 and 2 minutes of their views on what needs to be done so Africa is not left behind, and maybe what they think that they are doing that they'd like to share. So I'd like to start with the founder of the Africa Public Health Foundation that looks at dealing with emergencies and pandemics very deeply. It works closely with Africa CDC. In fact, it goes ahead to achieve the mission and the vision of Africa CDC through a foundation structure. Let me invite Dr. Bernard Haufiku. I know this is a weekend. He's away from the city, but Haufiku, if you can hear us, please begin your 1 minute, 2 minute intervention now on the open forum. Over to you. Bernard, are you able to log in and dial in? I want to hear from you. And if you are not able to speak to us for your power intervention, I would like to move on to Githinji. Dr. Gitahi, I think this would be great for you to start off and tell the panel. Give us your 2 minutes of comments. You've got some extra time now.
Thanks, Amit. That's very generous of you. And very, very delighted to hear the presentation, the previous presentation. It's great how much activity and investment of time and resources is there on the future of vaccines to ensure that we can go back to full economic activity. But I want to just mention 2 things, and some of it, you know, I'm sure Njao would reflect on this because of the research going on with Pfizer. The first thing I would like to say is that vaccines don't save lives. Vaccine programs save lives. That vaccines on their own, without a proper regulatory delivery, cold chain, and otherwise resources in country, and finally community acceptance, do not save lives unless those things are in place. So we need, my urge for this panel is that we need to focus on how African governments look beyond the vaccine. You know, many of you, you know, I have listened to a very good friend of mine, who is the Kenya Minister of Health, differ in between hesitancy and acceptance of vaccines publicly, and talk about, for example, you know, it's create a big problem. So the first thing I would like to see, Amit and our colleagues, is I would like to see African governments right now focus on how to prepare vaccines vaccine programs for the COVID-19, not just wait for the vaccine. I want to see a country in Africa launch its vaccine program ahead of the vaccine availability. I want to see an African country launch the regulatory framework, the policy framework, who will receive, how, and how it's going to be delivered, and also the investments on the infrastructure required to deliver the vaccines, because without vaccine programs, vaccines are useless. That's the first point. The second point I want to talk about, which is related to that, is there's a difference between efficacy and effectiveness. That I know the pharma companies and research companies and the Oxford University and others are working so hard, and they're going to tell us about efficacy, which is really, really important. But that efficacy will only need to be, when it has to effectiveness to be delivered by vaccine, when, how, and we don't have the structure, then the vaccine effectiveness can drop from 95% to 10% because we don't have the structures that deliver the effectiveness. I think that is really what I would like to ask for. And looking forward to how do we support governments before the vaccine is approved to develop structures, regulatory and policy frameworks to ensure the vaccine is effective, it is delivered to the people, and that it is actually available at the last mile, considering this is an injectable. Therefore, we'll need, we have 1 billion
Yeah. Gitahi, we may have lost you in the last part of your intervention, but your messages were very clear. You made 2 quick points. It's not vaccines, but it's the vaccine program. We must look at effectiveness and not just efficacy, but the regulatory and policy must be in place. Very spot on. In fact, it gives us a good segue to Sanjeev Gadia, who you all have seen has been utilizing airspace, crisscrossing Africa to provide commodities, PPEs, and many other things. Sanjeev, now's the time for you to be part and parcel of a program well in advance before the doses come. Will you be able to ensure that they supply, cold chain is maintained, and we can use airspace to make this happen? Sanjeev, over to you for your 2-minute intervention. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tucker, and good afternoon, everyone. My organization, Astral Aviation, specializes in the air freight of vaccines, and we have participated in a number of immunization projects, including the Ebola and also the cholera immunization project. We have 3 levels of intervention that we are engaged in. And the first level of intervention is the air freight and the logistics, which is to bring the vaccine from whether it's India or China into the Nairobi hub. Then the second part of our intervention is the storage of the vaccine at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. Currently, we have 90,000 square feet of cold storage facility, which is available at our hub in Nairobi. And with this opportunity, we will be able to store vaccines temporarily. And now it actually takes us to the third stage, which is the air distribution of vaccines to the rest of Africa. During the COVID pandemic, we have actually flown to 42 countries in Africa with the PPEs, testing kits, and also ventilators, like what Dr. Tucker has said. But now we are getting ready for the ultimate challenge in the history of our company, which is the air logistics of the COVID vaccine. We have a fleet of 14 cargo aircrafts, and each and every aircraft of ours is going to be available for the transportation of vaccines. We're already working with UNICEF and the COVAX project, which they are supporting, along with other organizations as a part of the vaccine initiative in Africa. And we are very confident that the 20% of vaccines which have been earmarked for 2021 would be something that we would be able to meet the requirements. And it's not only our airline in Africa, but it's also the combination of other airlines in the world and also African carriers who will be able to meet the responsibility of making sure that every vaccine arrives safely and is able to reach the final destination in a safe and secure manner. So we're very confident that in 2021, we will be ready for the task of transporting the COVID vaccine, and we look forward to collaborating with the vaccine manufacturers and with the organizations to actually make sure that Africa receives its vaccines in a safe and in a timely manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And I really am so happy that you've looked and talked about the storage as well. It's sometimes people don't realize that adequate and appropriate storage is important. You know, we are all now segueing from what Gitahi talked about. It's developing a program. And I want to bring in also Dr. Ernest Darko on how do we track this? How do we monitor? And, you know, one of the challenges is also tracking these doses, making sure it's at the right place, but also using technology. Your intervention, Ernest, would be useful now. Let's invite Ernest to speak to us for his 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me on this call. A really fascinating discussion. I had the good fortune of our company, Broadreach, working as one of the lead organizations in helping to pave the way for the introduction of the cervical cancer vaccine in South Africa. And that experience was very instructive in terms of the kind of practical challenges you run into when trying to introduce, in this case, it was a late childhood vaccine into a landscape that previously did not have that as an existing framework. And I think Dr. Gitahi's intervention is extremely important that we pay attention to what he said, because the devil is in the detail when we talk about large scale now, what might be adult vaccination programs. We basically do not have the model in place, right? And I think this is really important for us to acknowledge, first and foremost, we really do not have an effective framework and model for doing adult vaccinations at scale, meaning that things like vaccination records for adults, particularly how do you track a multi-dose regimen on some kind of record that is easily accessible and ideally not on paper, because one of the biggest challenges is trying to do this all through paper-based modes where you'll only know if someone had the vaccine if they come with their yellow card, for example. It's not going to work if we want to move quickly and systematically work our way through a population. So Amit, in one of your earlier slides, you mentioned, I would really strongly recommend you add that as I think it was a fifth challenge, right? The lack of an effective actual model in place. In terms of tracking this, I really do, one project we have been working on is a cross-border immunization program to track children across the Kenya-Uganda border. And I do really think this is a time where the relevant powers that be really need to really align around the concept of some kind of electronic vaccination record that can travel with you wherever you are, where the data can be accessible from any point. And so we have a pilot at the Kenya-Uganda border. I'm assuming members on this call may have other examples of people who have trialed these types of solutions, but I very strongly advocate that since we have a little bit of time, hopefully, to prepare, that we basically look at identifying at least some of the best in class electronic type immunization records, and then you scale the vaccination on the basis of tracking them through an electronic type of record where we can rationally see who got what, and then even track the pharmacovigilance then reporting through electronic means. So that would be my main intervention at this particular point. I'm excited that we do have viable candidates, but I think the devil is going to be in the detail of how we actually implement this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. I'll definitely add that extra point to make it a point for models in our next conversation. Thank you for your intervention. Let me now invite Dr. Ian Barton, who's the Chief Executive Officer at CHAI, Clinton Health Access Initiative, that we all know has been in the forefront. He dials in from Cape Town. Ian, your 2-minute intervention would be great now. Share with us your viewpoints.
Thanks, Amit. I do hope you can hear me. It's really interesting to listen to this style of conversation and to hear the level of insight and understanding and the breadth of understanding that is being experienced across the marketplace. The order of magnitude of challenge that we face in the effective deployment of these vaccines is not only a real challenge for everything that we know and everything that we've experienced and all of the systems that we have, but it's also a great opportunity for learning. It's a great opportunity for establishing standards. It's a great opportunity for people to become aware of the challenges around these things. But it's also a great opportunity for us to engage with a number of patients and a range of patients across the markets in a single event of critical importance. And we've got to keep asking ourselves on how can we leverage that opportunity for ongoing care, for ongoing health record management. I do think that there's a big gap, even with all the work that we've done over the years, there's a big gap in knowledge around cold chain and supply chain. I think there's a simplicity in belief that there's, this is stuff that can be done. But I think for those of us who have worked in healthcare supply chain, there's a very real knowledge of just how steep the mountain is and what the challenges will be if we have to accommodate ultra cold chain at -80, -70. Even managing validated cold chains at -20 is not going to be simple, because some harsh reality is that even in the 2 to 8 range, we do have challenges as well. So I think we're going to require a level of agility and responsiveness that we probably have never had before, because information's coming at us fast and intensely, and we're going to have to be building lots of scenario planning, lots of alternates, so that once we actually see which way procurements go, which candidates actually are coming to market, we're able to put the right controls, right structures, and right capacity in place to be able to receive, store, and deliver product down. It's quite superb how much one is seeing in the lay press at the moment on the difference between getting a vaccine and administering a vaccine. And it's great to hear this kind of conversation, Amit, where the concentration is moving very clearly into administering a vaccine and getting it into the patient arm. Thanks.
Thanks. I think you've re-emphasized 2 points. It's not vaccines, but it's vaccination that we need to focus on. And I think this cold chain and the supply chain model is literally important. We should have early conversations with people like Sanjeev, who are already on the call, but also people who supply power, innovations around cold chain, logistics company. It's a great point, Ian, that you raise. Let me now move to the other side of Africa, right from the south all the way to the north. In Morocco, Ismail Sheikh Lalou is deeply involved in the pharma industry. And of course, he's going to give us his views about vaccines and COVID situation, COVID vaccine roadmap from his perspective. Ismail, please share with us your views. Welcome to the call.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. Thank you, Dr. Amit, and good afternoon, everyone. I don't know if you hear me well.
I can hear you well.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. Actually, maybe I could be one of the fewest who represent the private sector, actually, because maybe allow me a few words on my company. Cooper Pharma is a leading player in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industry in Morocco, and has also a strong presence in Africa, but especially French West Africa. So as you said, yes, we are in the north of the continent, and with good activity in Fresh West Africa mostly. The idea, and I think that this situation, the COVID situation, of course, has changed a lot of things for our business and for our sector, of course. But from our perspective, as you know, Morocco has a national strategy that allow us to be maybe in the front of the vaccination program, especially with one or two partners. I think I don't want to say any mistakes, but I think that the national strategy of Morocco had already signed with 2 major vaccine programs. What I would like to share with you is that a company like Cooper Pharma has the willingness of providing its own distribution facilities and capacities, especially in Morocco, but also in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, in where we have a future manufacturing unit already in place, and another one in Kigali, Rwanda. So the simple idea from our perspective as a private sector player is that we could provide distribution centers. We are not into the big strategies on vaccines because it's not our role, but we would like to help, and we would like to provide our distribution centers in order to help the provision of the vaccines in whole Africa. So this is what I would like to say. The intervention is quite brief, but thank you for the opportunity anyway.
Regards to everybody in Morocco, and thank you for your intervention and your play in distribution. I'm sure many partners will be counting on more partners. Let me invite Harold Nusa, who is a global health expert with a great career history, also with Novartis, to give us his 2-minute intervention. Harold, over to you.
Thank you, Amit, and thanks for being part of this fantastic discussion. I just want to share one thought. In my contribution to this session series 10 days ago, I have stressed the importance of coordination and the importance for generating evidence on outcomes. That said, I think this extraordinary and impressive effort on the vaccination yields an additional opportunity. As this vaccination will be a pan-population effort, let's leverage deployed resources as wisely and widely as possible, for example, through taking the blood pressure and or the HbA1c when people present even twice for the vaccination and record that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think wisely and widely will be remembered. And yes, I remember your coordination emphasis even a few days ago on the seminar. Thank you so much. Let me now invite Lisa Slater, who is the head of public affairs in Africa, Roche, to give us her perspective on this subject matter. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Amit, and thanks everyone. Such a good conversation so far, especially this concept of vaccination versus the vaccine itself. I mean, of course, we're all really excited in the last days and weeks to see the good data. And it is also very encouraging to see the robust preparation from Africa CDC and even this conversation today about what we need to do now before we really have the vaccine on the ground. I thought that I could maybe make a point here about not losing sight that the overall exit strategy for the pandemic is not just vaccination. I mean, we really have 3 prongs, both the vaccination itself, treatment for patients with COVID. We still have many months ahead for that, as well as the widely available testing. And it's really when we have all 3 of those in place that we're going to be able to exit this pandemic most successfully. And I suppose on a positive note for the pandemic, I think that COVID has been a catalyst for some important lessons around agility for us, for all of us, and how we work together. I think that the way the global community has come together in the response has been extraordinary, whether that's these exceptionally fast clinical trials for vaccines or other treatments. They've been really global in nature. We've seen them in Africa, which is very exciting to see how companies have approached that. I think there's been some very innovative responses in things like the African Medicines Platform from Africa CDC, and that's something that's going to have longevity beyond the pandemic and really benefit the continent here, and that innovation is really meaningful. And then, of course, the collaboration that many people have mentioned, Sanjeev and Ismail just talked about this, but even those of us that are not vaccine makers, we do have, high quality and reliable cold chain and a lot of experience with supply chain on the continent, and are very happy to be at the table and be partners as this moves forward. And so would just encourage that continued collaboration between all of us, both vaccines, treatments, and testing as we go forward. And lastly, I would just like to echo both what Harold and Ian said about seeing this as an opportunity to leverage this into the future. We have now these deeper and more meaningful relationships and collaborations that have been established through the pandemic, and I hope that we can continue those for UHC and health system strengthening overall.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Many people have said, use this crisis as an opportunity, and you have mainly really emphasized that. I really like the agility part that you brought up. And I think that is really absolutely vital for us to take advantage of. Thank you, Lisa, for your interventions. Look, as I mentioned, this is an ongoing conversation. I do want to quickly move on to the closing remarks that's going to be given to us by Karim Bendahu, who is the head of Africa Merck and chair of the Africa Committee of IFPMA. I want him to circle up what we've heard so far, but I do want to also, before he says, I want to recognize many people who are on the call, like I've got Kenneth Macharia, I've got Rajiv Gera, we've got Ghosh, we've got Mohammed El Sahili, Andrew Brown. Also, I want to recognize Professor Morgan Chetty and many more people who are experts, Jyoti Tiwari. We will keep this conversation going. I know time usually runs out. We do have only about 15, 17 minutes remaining, but I want to give the 5-minute closing remarks to Karim, and then I want to talk to you about what will be the next steps and invite you to join the roadmap of this convening and connection. Please welcome Karim Bendahu.
Amit.
Yes, Gitahi, of course.
Amit, I know I'm always very mannerless, so I like to interject.
No.
And I know Karim is coming to give his final remarks, and I'm really sorry I dropped off. I just wanted to ask, who is counting the cost of vaccination in Africa rather than the cost of the vaccine? I know I saw the presentation by Africa CDC, and I've seen a lot of costing, and the costing is focusing on the vaccine rather than the vaccine programs. I think that's something we need to pick up and do, because the vaccine program cost could actually overwhelm the vaccination program itself. And I'm done. I'm happy to listen to Karim. Thank you.
It's absolutely a good point. And in my third slide, I actually showed in Ghana, the cost of vaccination is about 67% higher than the cost of vaccine. And even in Benin, where HR costs are lower than Ghana, but the cost of vaccines are almost equal. So I totally get your point. And those are some of the challenges we need to put together on our ongoing conversation. So we are marking 3rd December, and I'll tell you what 3rd December is going to be. And I hope that we'll answer some of your questions and your comments here. Thanks, Gitahi. So, yeah. Karim, over to you. And
thank you.
We've had great conversations. Try to wrap it up.
It was an amazing conversation, really. It is very encouraging. I mean, what I have heard today, so many stakeholders, who moved from a talk to a full commitment and actions. So if we like to summarize the situation, we secured almost already 2 billion doses of vaccine for Africa, I would say, through the COVAX program under the leadership of the ACT. And the CDC is working on securing the rest, the other 1.2, 1.5 billion doses required. We will see how this is going to happen, but it's quite progressing in the right direction. But on the other side, we have 54 countries, which is 54 regulatory system. Are they ready to manage vaccines? Whatever is the storage conditions and the storage requirements of those vaccine. I mean, 2 to 8 degrees, -20, -70, -80. According to the type of vaccine, we'll have different storage conditions. But I think the preparedness in terms of distribution and vaccination campaign is not clearly is not yet, we are not yet there. And in terms of air freight, I heard that we are ready. We are not ready because we need probably 1,000 to 1,200 aircrafts to organize the transportation of all the doses. I mean, this part should be now considered very seriously, and we have on this part to move into action. Coordination is key, absolutely. That's going to be very important, you know. Bringing all these doses to the end user and to the population is not an easy task. But on the top of that, we cannot do it in an uncoordinated or an hectic manner. That's I think the learning of today. But there is another one that we should also consider, is that it's not the last pandemic, unfortunately. Obviously, we almost know that it's not the last one. And we have also to consider increase our preparedness in Africa to the coming ones. I mean, we are learning a lot from this one, but again, I'm really repeating my call. We need to build vaccines fill and finish capacity in Africa. It's extremely important. We have to do it now. It's maybe too late for this, for the COVID-19 vaccine. Because it requires 18 months, but we need to really put in place a serious investment program to have like between 10 and 12 filling capacities in Africa. That's it, Amit, from my side.
I totally get that, and you've wrapped it up really nicely. Look, we need to work together. We need to build capacity. You're using numbers like 100,000. You've told us about distribution. You've told about logistics. You know, Andrew has already written from Intra Health about human resources. Nyawira has written an interesting question as well. I do want to thank everyone. I've seen Sarah Noor there. I've seen Christine on the line. I've also seen somebody who is in the vaccine side. He's called Titi Motsema Al. So I want to thank everybody for coming in. We don't have time to really go around and take all the comments or questions. Can I first say thank you so much for your time. This conversation, personally, I've learned a lot. I've also realized some pain points in policy discussions, in partnership discussions. Many of the points I've learned today will be put onto those discussions as we go on. I want to thank Africa CDC. Dembi, your presentation was really good. I really think you set the stage, and you'll be, I don't know how you guys are doing it there, but I'm sure it's like a hot oven at Africa CDC right now, but we are with you. And we will call you again to give us update as we move on. Let me now just announce how we're going to do our next session. It's going to be on the 3rd of December, and it's going to be the access to COVID-19 vaccines for Africa. We will add many of the points, Karim, that you did a wrap up from the panelists. We'll try to stitch them in. I want you guys to save the date, and our team will send you the login details. We might have an actual wider session, and this will be focusing on maybe 2 quick panels. One will be the vaccines and other will be vaccination. And they will literally have an in-depth, maybe financial analysis and the challenges. So please save the date, save the time, and I'll see you then. And I wish you a great weekend, and thank you again for your time on Saturday to talk about this important conversation. Bye for now. Have a great weekend.
Remember